Good evening and welcome to the Too Deep, a football podcast. With us, as always, Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network, NFL.com. Eric Eager from Pro Football Focus. You can read his work at PFF.com. My name is Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB. Conference Championship round, gentlemen. That's where we are now with the playoffs. And as there always is at this time of year, we'll get to the games in a little bit. A lot of NFL news to cover coming at you tonight or today or this morning, whenever you're getting us. If you're catching us via the podcast a little bit later on, we'll talk about Ryan Poles making the hire of Matt Eberflus. Denver tabs Nathaniel Hackett, Packers offensive coordinator, as their next head coach. Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, now the general manager of the Minnesota Vikings. From Wall Street to the GM spot, what does this mean for where the NFL is going at the GM position? Sean Payton leaving the Saints. Is he done with coaching? Dan Quinn does not get a head coach job. Brady, is he back? Roethlisberger retired. Is he a first ballot Hall of Famer? Rams and Niners, Chiefs and Bengals. Who's playing in the Super Bowl? We get to it all right here on the 2D podcast. And let's start with you, Jeff. Ryan Poles hires Matt Eberflus. First of all, what do you think of the hire? We'll go through that, but then let's also talk about what this means when it's a general manager coming over from the Kansas City Chiefs and he does not hire Eric Bieniemy as his head coach with the Bears.
Well, I think Ryan Poles, congrats to him. Smart guy, talented exec, young man with a bright future in the front office. To me, it seems like a no-brainer. When you look at his resume, you look at what the things he's been around, the success he's had within the Chiefs organization, the way he's risen. And I like the fact that I said on the Red Bolt and Gold podcast, I like the fact that he went in there and wanted to make the coaching hire. That you rarely see guys that young, he's 36 years old, having the nerve to go in there and ask for that kind of power in your first front office job, your first GM job. And it would have been very easy for him to go in there and be grateful for the opportunity. Let's face it, a lot of people didn't know who Ryan Poles was until about outside of the Chiefs organization until about 3 weeks ago. He had the balls to go in there and ask for what he wanted. And now he has the coach he wanted, Matt Eberflus from the Indianapolis Colts. A guy, by the way, who's definitely very certain qualified to be a head coach, being a defensive coordinator for a really good football team for the last 4 years. But, yeah, I look at when Poles was hired, that was the big question I had. Was he going to go and look at Eric Bieniemy and say, come in, interview, let's have a serious conversation about what you can do. You've been around this organization as long as Bieniemy's been here, got over almost a decade now. And so you know him better than any GM out there. And the fact that there was no interview there was no opportunity for Bieniemy to pursue that job. And I get that Matt Nagy had been the head coach there and had been a former OC with the Chiefs. But I just don't know where Eric Bieniemy goes from here. Because to me, it's a kiss of death. If a guy who knows you that well, who's in position to run a front office, who's been given the power, who was picked up by the owner of the team and trusted by the owner of the team to make this decision, isn't calling you up and giving you the job, I don't think anybody else in the NFL is.
Yeah. What do you think, Eric? What does this mean for Eric Bieniemy? What do you think of the hire for the Bears?
Well, I think Poles had a decent amount of leverage here because he, was the Vikings' first choice from all indications. He also wanted to be Minnesota's general manager from reports I've heard. And so when he went to Chicago, he had some leverage that a lot of first-time general manager candidates don't have, right? And so, the Bears stepped up from what I've heard and gave him a sizable contract. Gave him the power, as we've all seen, to hire a head coach. So good for him. I think that's a great start to his career as general manager, being able to have some power right when he walks into the door. I think part of this, and maybe my time frames are off a little bit just because the season was 18 weeks long and not 17. But it was sort of like the Vikings and the Bears got their general manager searches sort of off to a slow start. Once they got those things done, then the head coach, it felt like the head coaching searches were, forced, right. Or rushed. And, there are things about Bieniemy that, there was the off the field issues early in his career and all that kind of stuff that other men have gotten hired despite of. So like that could be a reason. But the other reason I feel like, and this is where I think it's cheap, is that the Chiefs now are hosting their fourth consecutive AFC Championship game. They're 7.5-point favorites to play in the Super Bowl for the third straight year. Some of these people like, I gotta get started right away, right? So then they hire somebody off of a less successful team much quicker than they would hire somebody like Eric Bieniemy, and that to me I think is unfortunate because I don't really think there's much you're doing from now until February 15th that you couldn't just get the guy in place and have him work out that way. So it's unfortunate, but Matt Eberflus, as Jeff said, has been a good defensive coordinator for the Colts. So he's certainly qualified for the job, but it is questionable. I disagree with Jeff that Eric Bieniemy doesn't have a chance to get a head coaching job here. I do think that the New Orleans late retirement by Sean Payton helps him. But it does, obviously his chances went way down this week.
What about this? Mark puts up in the chat room, if you're catching us via the podcast later on, we stream live Tuesdays at 9 p.m. on Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook. Mark says, given how quick the hire was after he got there, did he really have that much say? How about it, Jeff? Was this an ownership hire? Ryan Poles wanted to make the hire, but he did do it in about 24 hours, or no? Is it he's probably, the announcement of Ryan Poles came 24, 48, 72 hours after he'd actually been put in place, and they were just waiting to get a contract done. What's the timeline here say to you about who was in charge of the hire?
Well, first off, you can go off what's been reported. And so I trust what I've read and heard that Poles wanted to hire the coach. Secondly, when you're a GM and you go and interview for a job, you're going to have a pretty clear idea about the coaches you like, who you want to hire when you have this conversation with ownership. You're not going to go through your resume and do all this talking and, talk about vision for the team and not have that conversation about who you want as a head coach. So there's a pretty good chance that Matt Eberflus was on the same list that the Bears had already, people the Bears had already been looking at. So I don't think there's really a reason there to question whether it was his call. And really, and I saw a couple of people point out, well, they weren't going to hire two straight coaches from the Chiefs. I agree with that. The point here isn't that they should have hired another Chiefs coach. The point is, who is going to give Eric Bieniemy a shot for a job? And so when you have somebody who knows you, as Ryan Poles knows Eric Bieniemy, and I'm not in any way endorsing the idea that Poles should have called him up and brought him in and given him the job. But it is, as an owner, if I'm watching this from afar and saying, if a guy who knows this man isn't willing to give him a shot, why should I? And I disagree with Eric on this. I don't see how New Orleans is going to factor in this because Eric Bieniemy, from all we know, has had one job interview, and that job just went to Nathaniel Hackett.
Yeah.
Why do you?
I just think maybe New Orleans with the New Orleans, but maybe the entire league has dragged their feet on the head coaches this year, so that might work to Bieniemy's favor, or it also might not. Like there are a situation where if for example, Peyton retires and the whole league has already signed their coaches like they probably would have a couple years ago, then New Orleans just waits it out because they're like, well, what good is it? The whole litter has been picked. But, it hasn't, right? Like only one head coaching job has been filled so far, in the Bears as well as the Denver Broncos. The connection here, though, the Poles thing, the question about why it was so fast, like we do have to understand that the connection between Indianapolis scouting and Kansas City scouting is real, right? Ballard was a higher up with the Chiefs. Ballard still maintains really good relationships with people on the Chiefs. I did do a little bit of digging, and I did ask some people, what they thought of, why. I just asked, like, what's the deal with Bieniemy, right? Like, and the people I talked to, they acknowledged sort of they acknowledged that the reports of back when he was, in Colorado,
right?
But they also said that he, from all indications, is extremely qualified and is a good man. Like the word I heard, the phrase I heard was good man, right? So I don't think that Poles necessarily believes negative things about Bieniemy, and this isn't the admission of such a thing. I think it's a lot of things that come together, including the fact that Chris Ballard is probably responsible for a lot of Ryan Poles' success, and Matt Eberflus is a Ballard. Like there are sort of connections here that give the plausible deniability, but I agree with Jeff in the sense that it does not look good for Bieniemy as far as this guy not hiring him.
I will say this, the slow pace could be that people are waiting on to see if he gets knocked out, at least in the conference championship round. They're saying, we'll wait till then. But do they wait another 2 weeks till after the Super Bowl? I will point out that, Charlie Weiss and Romeo Crennel waited quite a while. They had 3 championship rings as coordinators with the Patriots. So this would not be the first time somebody has been, passed over. And it wasn't until they were finally knocked out. Charlie Weiss ultimately going the college route, right? Romeo Crennel going to the Browns, but not until they got knocked out early. So this is not unprecedented the way this has gone with Eric.
Brad Childress is the same way, right? Brad Childress was only the Vikings coach the year that McNabb tore his ACL and they missed the playoffs. Like, it was the same thing with Childress, another Reed assistant, to your point.
Well, let's not forget the irony here with Hackett getting that job in Denver. He's not calling the plays, right? And so that's also was a knock on the enemy here, was that, he's not calling the plays.
Great point. Yeah, it's a great point. How about Hackett to Denver, Jeff? You like the hire, and does it mean Aaron Rodgers is soon to follow?
Look, I don't know much about Nathaniel Hackett. He did a decent job with the Jaguars when he was down there. I think being around Aaron Rodgers and Matt LaFleur can't hurt your coaching pedigree, your coaching acumen. This feels like a domino falling. This feels like we're trying to position ourselves to make Aaron Rodgers want to be here. Look, I think everything Denver is doing is about Aaron Rodgers being there this season. I think Teddy Bridgewater was about that. I think getting rid of Vic Fangio at this point. I think passing on Justin Fields, trading Von Miller. All these things have been to get to this point. Now, whether they can bring it home, we'll see. I think Aaron Rodgers is still under contract with the Green Bay Packers. Everything that I've heard and seen says they're going to do everything possible to keep him there. Yes, there's a gentleman's agreement in place, but what does that really mean? If he's going to go anywhere, it's going to be the Broncos. It won't be a simple process, but it's made that much easier by having somebody there who he really trusts and likes and can get him what he wants offensively.
I know we've got Dan Quinn on the rundown. I'll throw this in. I mentioned this the other night on the Red Golden Bowl podcast that, I was on in Denver and they're like, well, Dan Quinn's the leader. What do you think? And I said, well, book me now for 3 years from now when they fire Dan Quinn because, it's coming. And so I will give them this credit, and I know this is, Eric, something we've talked about. I talked about it with your partner for the PFF forecast, George Cheruri, today on the radio show. They hired offense, and I think that's smart. Right? Like, I think you have to find somebody that can click with the quarterback and then isn't going to leave to take a head coaching job someplace else and force the quarterback to start over with a new system. I just think it's good for business. Not to say that there aren't defensive coaches that might be better, choices when it's all said and done, but I think you're more likely to have success with an offensive coach. And I think the Broncos recognize that. And to Jeff's point, I mean, it's to make, they got a guy to go get Aaron Rodgers. I mean, if they don't get Aaron Rodgers and frankly, Devontae Adams as well, is this hire a bust?
Yeah, and we actually did some work for one of the agencies this week about that, about making a case for defensive coaches and all that. And I think the Broncos are in the perfect position where a defensive coach makes 0 sense, right? Because, I actually think a defensive coach makes sense when it's Mike Zimmer taking over the Vikings and they're terrible and they just need to get, Robert Salah with the Jets made a lot of sense to me because that team needs to just get good. Right. But if you are where the Broncos are and the problem is extremely acute, which is you're in a division with 2 megastar quarterbacks and also a pretty good quarterback who took his team to the playoffs this year in Derek Carr. Like, you're not like Vic Fangio can do nothing for you right now. Right. Because Vic Fangio is just going to want Bridgewater. He's just going to want 8 wins and you're just never going to get anywhere. So that Nathaniel Hackett, has had experience there. Calling plays for Jacksonville. He was part of that AFC title game run for them. He also, is very well thought of within the league as far as people I talk to say they like his enthusiasm, they like his people skills and all that kind of stuff. And to me, I agree with Jeff, pointed it out about Bieniemy, the head coach doesn't have to call plays, right? The head coach, we're selecting for some different skill set sometimes, and it's a delegator in many ways. We all look at Reed and McVay and Shanahan. that's survivorship bias. Those guys are amazing. And like, if you want to find that guy on the street, good freaking luck, right? Find a guy who's good at managing people and who can, and if he's an offensive geared person, then that's great as well. Because he can do what Andy's done over the past 5 or 6 years with the Chiefs, which is, build a guy up and be kind of that base that keeps that offense moving. So I agree with the idea of an offensive minded person. I agree with Hackett. And I agree with you on Dan Quinn. Like, Dan Quinn probably is smart enough to know that a lot of the Dallas stuff this year was noisy as hell. And, he might be, does he want to get found out in a franchise that's going to get drilled by the Chiefs and the Chargers over the next 3 years?
Yeah, well, let's examine that. Did he come back? I mean, if it's noisy, in other words, you're saying, hey, a lot of it was maybe things kind of broke his way on the defensive side of the ball, so he looks better than he really should be perceived, right? That's what you're getting at when you say noisy, right? So I think the point that I would ask is, if he's coming back, like if he had offers and he's like, nah, I don't like these, I'm going to wait for a better one, then he's lost his mind, because I don't think he will look better. I personally, I don't think he was offered jobs. That's what I think happened. I don't think he went Broncos. I'm going to stick it. I'm going to stick it out here in Dallas, because what are you doing, particularly when Sean Payton is walking away in New Orleans, who lives in Dallas, who's been rumored to go to Dallas a couple of times. It's just a matter of how long he wants to sit on the sidelines. Maybe it's 3 years, so he can say, hey, I'll jump in. At that point, they will have run it in the ground. We'll have draft picks. I'll run the whole show. I doubt it. I think it's a year, and they're giving up draft pick compensation next year to bring Sean Payton in. And Dan Quinn's probably fired anyway, or he's the DC under Sean Payton, and that doesn't make him shine any brighter. I mean, that's got to factor into this. Like, why would you stay when doesn't everybody – am I the only one that thinks that Sean Payton will be the next coach of the Cowboys?
Look, I think he's playing the Josh McDaniels card, which is, as long as you can stay someplace – I'm sure Jerry Jones is paying him a ton of money. Jerry Jones, if he has an assistant coach he likes, he will take care of you. Daniel Quinn's going to get a lot of love for the defense that he's put together. The defense is not going to get worse with Micah Parsons and Trayvon Diggs and all those guys down there next season. So he's going to be sitting in a really good spot. I agree with you. I think there was a pretty good chance he read the tea leaves and said, I don't want to be out here not getting an offer. And I have a Super Bowl appearance. I've had a successful run as a head coach. What's that? Yeah.
Super Bowl ring as a defensive coordinator.
Yeah. And so if I'm not getting snapped up right now, I'm pulling out. I think that was his play of like, either you want me really badly or I'm going to sit around and wait another year I'll be out there again next cycle.
Yeah. And I think you're right. I'm a little bit heavy-handed about the oscillatory nature of defense, but like, you're in a division with Daniel Jones, whoever the Washington quarterback's going to be. Yeah. And Philly, like, you might just be a good defense based upon your opponents. And there's also like, McCarthy might be fired next year, and that could be Dan Quinn. Like, if Payton, we always talk about this specific guy, Payton, being in that spot, but like Payton might like another job, right? Like, Dallas isn't the only one for him. He could also I also believe that after decades of working extremely hard for this amount of money, working not that hard for almost the same amount of money for somebody like NBC or whatever, like, might end up being like, he might be more of a Gruden than we believe, right? Like, so I think Quinn sort of surveyed all of that and said, I'm going to end up staying here, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, by cap, if you're looking at attractive places by cap, Dolphins are one. You got to believe in the quarterback, right? I think it's as much the quarterback first, cap room second, but most cap room right now going into next year. Dolphins, Chargers, jobs not open, Jags, and you've got what's supposed to be a franchise quarterback. Bengals, Jets, Broncos, Colts, Seahawks, Washington, and the Bears. Those are the top 10 cap positions going into it if you want to dream a dream or think about where people might be wanting to go. I just, Sean Payton, like, does he strike you as a media guy?
He didn't up until his press conference. I mean, this is a dude who was really not into the media for a long time because of that Bounty Gate stuff, and really tried to punish a lot of media members for for not doing more to defend him or to look into what the league was doing in that situation. He went on a years-long tirade against anybody who wasn't super close to him. There was like a handful of people who he talked to. But yeah, then he gives like a press conference that starts out with a 33-minute soliloquy as he's leaving town, which, I don't see him as a media superstar. I don't, maybe I'm wrong. I'm not in that business of hiring these people. This feels like I'm going to take a year off. I'm going to wait until they fire Mike McCarthy. I'm going to slide right into that job with Jerry Jones. We probably already talked about it, what it would look like. I know Jerry. I know he'll give me what I want power-wise. And the one thing I'll say about that New Orleans job, that has been a very stressful position, for the last 15 years. Obviously trying to build a winning franchise, going through natural disasters. He's had a player killed down there. Will Smith got shot, and the next player got shot in a car road race situation. Obviously the Bounty Gate stuff. And he's been the guy, the front man for that franchise for 15 years. It speaks to how hard it is to do what Andy Reid has done in Philadelphia and in Kansas City, because normal people just have a hard time keeping these jobs for 10 years and keeping their sanity. So I totally can understand why he would want to break and why he would look for greener pastures, because that job was a lot more fun when Drew Brees was playing and they didn't have $44 million of salary cap space to figure out. Let's face it.
He's totally getting out before.
And Tom Brady wasn't in that division, although he's killed Tom Brady 4 of the last 5 times.
Yeah, but the waiter's coming. The bill is big, and he is got to go. I'm out. Somebody else is paying the tab.
Yeah, Trevor Siemian, get out of here.
People think he's money laundering with Taysom Hill.
$72 million over the cap right now going into next year are the New Orleans Saints. That's what he's leaving behind.
And they don't have any good players on the offense either, like offensive skill positions other than Kamara. They don't have any wide receivers. They don't have a tight end. They don't have a quarterback. They don't have and they're $70 million over.
I want to tie up the Aaron Rodgers part of the equation. Temecula saying competing in the AFC West will be quite a challenge, especially compared to that vaunted NFC North. Judge saying, all right, where does he end up? Where does Rodgers play next year? Or does he not play at all? Like, what is your prediction as it sits right now for where he'll be, Jeff?
Denver. If he's going anywhere, it's going to be Denver. I mean, they've got.
Well, Green Bay's an option. You could say Green Bay.
Yeah, Green Bay's not. But I just feel like that ship has sailed. If they had won a championship, I would feel better saying that. Like, okay, now that's the happy ending of the story, and everybody can do kumbaya and get together and love each other up and forget about all the past. I think losing it just gives him one more reason to bitch and moan about the situation there. And Denver, again, has played a lot of cards. They got, a 2 and a 3 for Von Miller in that trade with the Rams. Right. So you've got those 2 picks to offer up. You've got this year's one, next year's one. And if you really want, it's probably going to take 3 ones to do it. Yeah. But I don't think, look, it's not so much about Aaron Rodgers being fearful of competing someplace. I don't think he cares where he competes. I think he cares about having a great roster.
Wait, let's examine that, because that to me is a flaw.
Yeah.
That is a character flaw. That is a I don't like. You have to care, because you have to want to win, and to win and win a championship, right? To win a championship, you have to get to the Super Bowl. To get the Super Bowl, you got to get wins in the playoffs. Easiest way to get wins in the playoffs is to win your division and play at least one home game, right? You can't be the 1 seed and get a bye week without winning your division. So going in and giving it a good fight with Patrick Mahomes may sound noble, but it's definitely not a guy like I have respect for the fact that Tom Brady found a team with a ton of cap, lots of weapons, in a division that was on the massive decline, and said, this is the spot where I can go in and win right now. But
they were the wild card team in that division. People forget that. They got killed by the Saints twice. The Saints won that division last year. So it's no different than going into a division like the AFC West. I mean, now.
It is, though, because you want to – I mean –
we're giving the Chargers a lot more love. They didn't make the playoffs the last 2 years, right?
But the Raiders did.
Yeah. I think the Denver Broncos with Aaron Rodgers would be better than the
my issue, though, is you're going to have to – if you're the Denver – and, this is – as Chiefs fans, I'm like, okay, come at me. don't wound what you can't kill here, because if you're Denver and you give up 3 first-round picks for a quarterback who's close to 40, and you got to give up Jerry Jeudy, you got to give up Alberto, it was somebody on that team. They're going to have to give up one of those players, right? And Rodgers. And here's the thing with Rodgers, and like we talked about this maybe I think on Tuesday, but when he got the toe injury back, right? Like when he got back from the toe injury, his best play was after the toe injury, because he was staying confined. He was doing what LaFleur wanted. He had all this stuff that like plagued him when he was with McCarthy. If he goes to Denver and Denver's traded 3 first-round picks for him and built this humongous thing for him, he's going to be cocky as hell. He's not going to be like he was in 2019, 2020, where they're coming off of 2 losing seasons in a row, and LaFleur is like, look, you better be on your best behavior, and then they draft Jordan Love. And there's like a lot of reasons why I think, like, personally, Rodgers was on his best behavior for the last 2 years. Is that going to be the case in Denver? Because we've seen a guy who, amazing, Hall of Famer, all that kind of stuff. But he's not that like far away from kind of being just an above average guy some years. And it all seems to be dictated by his mentality during a season, which we know is sort of up and down. And if he goes there and has a Brady-like year, right, where they get swept by the Chiefs and have to come through the 5 seed and all that stuff, does he have what Brady has as far as like I'm going to win this thing no matter. I'm going to pull a Super Bowl out of the 5 seed.
No,
I don't know if Rodgers has it in him.
No, but who else are you betting on though? What else are you going to bet on? He's better than anything else they got.
Agreed. If the price is the 3rd-round draft pick, you're all over it. I think the question becomes when you talk about 3 firsts or 2 firsts or 2
like
firsts
you
and a high-level player.
You could pill it. That franchise could be in the dust for years because of that move if Rodgers doesn't come in and win an AFC West that no one has won other than Pat for 4 years.
Let me throw in that a lot of people think Devontae Adams will be there as well, and you're putting a lot of money into a 29-year-old receiver. He should play at a high level for another year or 2, but then Adams
is going to command $30 million a year.
Yeah,
they're not a package deal,
and he deserves it. The thing is, DeAndre Hopkins. Everybody looks at Bill O'Brien as a boob for trading Hopkins to Arizona. Hopkins was making $27 million APY, which is $5 million more than any other wide receiver in football. And the reason why Adams has not signed that deal with Green Bay is because, like, you're insane for offering him that much. Except for he's better than DeAndre Hopkins, so he should get that much. So somebody's going to pay him that. And if Denver pays him that, and then trades all that stuff for Rodgers, and then pays Rodgers what he deserves, that team's going to be gone.
The ideal fit is what happened with Hopkins. It's somebody paying a first contract quarterback, right? Like, because if you're having to pay the $30 million for a quarterback and $30 million for a wideout, you're getting to where it's getting tough to put enough of a rest of a team around. And that's why I do think, listen, it might be that they win the AFC West 1, maybe 2 years, win a championship, and everybody goes, it was totally worth it, right? But it also could be a very steep price, I think, for sure. On the idea of, like, let me ask you this. You play pickup basketball, right, Jeff?
Yeah.
Because I've heard you talking about it. When you go down, do you grab, like, you look around, do you grab me when you want to run, like when you're looking what team you're going to run with, or do you grab, 6'4" Eric Eager? Because, like, if you want to be sporting, hey, go win with me. It'll certainly say more if you win with me on your team, my 5'9" fat ass. No, everybody looks to run with the best guys they can put around him because you're a competitor, because winning's fun and losing sucks. It's why I never have a team to play with when I go to the gym, right? Because people are competitors and they want to win. And you're not going to win rolling with me. And you're not going to win. You got 3 courts, like in college when you have multiple courts. I would play in center court. I don't need to go get my ass kicked by Derek Coleman, who's running the court out in the middle. I'll stay over here on the side court against the other, the little frat pukes that can't do anything. Come on. That's what competitors look to win. And you can't win with Patrick Mahomes blocking your way.
Yeah, I'm a different kind of guy. I look at it like whoever's out there I'm playing with, and we're winning. So that's how Aaron Rodgers goes. I'm like, well, come with me. If I got to do more, we're winning. So.
Okay, let's go play some hoops tomorrow.
Yeah, that's right.
I look forward to it. Yeah, you can watch me waddle up and down the court.
I'll be there this weekend. We can all hoop.
That's right. We'll go play. We'll go play some basketball. Yeah, I love that idea. Kwesi Adofo-Mensah How well did I do on his name on pronunciation? Because I've been practicing it. Am I good?
Mensa, like the society, I think makes sense given how sharp he is. Kwesi Adofo-Mensah.
Okay. I'm trying to get it right, and you guys both have spoken to him and know him, and so I'm trying to make sure I get the name right.
Kwesi apparently mentioned me in his intro press conference,
as he should.
Oh, wow.
Right? It was kind of weird,
as he should. Wall Street trader to general manager of the Vikings. Is this the evolution, Eric? I know you've done a lot of work on general manager stuff. You built software programs for these guys. You've done a lot of in-depth research for what their job is. Is this the right move to go get a numbers guy, an analytics guy? Frankly, a guy that's a lot more like you than the old school, sit in the film room, come up, dad was a coach, sit around, do all that, generally an older guy. He's really young too. That's the other thing. This looks a lot more like a Major League Baseball hire than it does an NFL hire. Is this the future, and is this going to be successful?
Yeah, and I think Kwesi went about his career really smartly, because he's not straight off of the energy commodities trading table, right? Like he went to, and I think when folks are like, oh, how committed is he to football? I mean, he went from making a lot of money in a job like that to going and working as an analytics assistant with the 49ers, which I can tell you doesn't make a lot of money. And then he became the director of their R&D, and then he became a step above that. So he was with the Niners, Harbaugh, Kelly, Tom Sula, and then Lynch and Shanahan. So he's kind of, I would say, I mean, he probably likes football just as much as me, but he's as big of a nerd. This isn't an outsider though. This is somebody who's been in the league on a team, and then he went and got the first ever vice president position with the Cleveland Browns for 2 years under Andrew Berry, as an analytics guy as well. And now he's with Minnesota. So it's interesting. I think listening to his press conference today and all that stuff, I think he has the right idea of what it's going to be, what he has to be an analytics GM, which is, I'm not coding another line of code in my life, right? I'm empowering people to make decisions. I'm building a scouting staff that I trust. And that, to me, he said all the right things today. And I've heard almost all good things about him. There are some people I think are a little threatened by him, and you can imagine why. He's a young, African-American guy who has a math degree from Ivy League. People are going to be threatened a little bit by him. But I think he ingratiated himself really well today. And from all my interactions with him, and he was a client, and they, in Cleveland, they spent a lot of money on PFF. I think he's a good hire. And I'm going to be rooting for him just because I think if he doesn't work, it's going to set back analytics guys in the league for a while. But it's an interesting hire for the Vikings. It's completely different from what they had with Spielman and Zimmer.
Is this the future, Jeff? Is younger, analytic-driven minds in the big chair?
I think it is. I think to a certain degree. There's always going to be teams or owners who are going to look at the guy who's come up the more traditional way, the scout, the personnel director, whatever, assistant GM route, whatever you want to call it. But you look at his background, Kwesi's background, and I think it's the kind of background owners can relate to better. They can say, oh, Ivy League school? Yeah, I know you. Oh, analytics, math, you got a master's in economics in Stanford? Oh, yeah, I know you. And that's what makes it, I think, more intriguing to me, is that he's representative in a lot of ways, like Andrew Berry, another Ivy League guy in Cleveland, of a different kind of GM, especially a minority GM. This is probably more so when people talk about hiring more diverse candidates in that pool. We talk about head coaches all the time, but really you get more head coaching candidates if you have more front office people, more executives who are of color, who can, basically show owners that, hey, I'm qualified. I can do this job. And I can pick somebody else who can do this job.
Yeah, I think he's more of a threat to the old guard as a math guy, as a numbers guy, as an analytics guy, than he is I think that's the thing. If anyone's sitting around going oh, I'm worried because there's going to be a black general manager come in here, you're the guy. The problem is that they're now valuing new skill sets. skill set that the old white guard does not have, because they're now valuing the education, the analytics, the math,
but also the adaptability. Like the story is like last year he interviewed for the general manager job in Carolina, and that was a job that Carolina casted a big net. They interviewed Adofo-Mensah, they interviewed Brand Tillis of Kansas City. I believe they interviewed Ryan Poles as well. And the basically the feedback that Adofo-Mensah got was, look, you have no scouting experience. And if you look at him this year, he spent a majority of their time. He spent a lot of his time on the road scouting players, right? Just like understanding what that is. And that's, like this. And again, I don't want to harken back to my experience because it's just one thing. But when I was in academics, like I was an applied mathematician. I worked, like I was hired to help people with like real world problems solve their problems. And like I used to like go out in the field and like collect data for biologists if I was working for biologists, just to know what they would have to do. Like I would go to these laboratories and like just watch things happen, because again, that's like, and even in football, like I watch film with football people, so I know like how to code things, because I know football fairly well, but I don't know as well as the other guys. And like I think when the question here that Adder Darkly has was the only concern about analytics guys as general managers is how are they going to weigh relationships? I think, to an extent of like a lot of times the analytics guys are the first people to ask football guys and say, look, can you teach me what life is like on your side so that I can make you better and I can make this whole thing more efficient? And that's really all we're trying to do. Like, we're trying to, and I would venture to guess, I'd make a pretty big bet that the Vikings scouting staff is going to be as big or bigger than it was with Spielman in place. It's just going to be the information is going to be used differently, right? But I think that's the misnomer there. And, I have a lot of faith that he'll do as good of a job as he can, because I think he also knows the risks, like how much he can control and how many he can't control.
Go ahead, Jeff, because I
was just gonna say that, and I think someone just said this. Analysts are usually humble. I think there is some value in that. There's some accuracy in that. And I met Kwesi on a flight to California 7 years ago when he was in a low level job, and was immediately struck by his charisma, his intelligence. I had dinner with him this past season when I was in Cleveland for a game, and we talked about just a funny story. He actually was, we were supposed to be at a restaurant downtown Cleveland. He went in with his one of his cousins who was in town with him, and it was some swanky place. The place was packed. They didn't know him. They were like, "Hey, we can't serve you." He walked out, and he was kind of like, "Okay, well, I'll go someplace else." And he was kind of like, "I really want to go eat." So he's like, he calls him in the Browns, comes back, lady rushes out, "Come on in, sit down." But I think that's the kind of person, he's the kind of person who can walk around and feel comfortable, being under the radar. He doesn't have to be a big time guy. I think he didn't want to make that call, but he was also hungry. But the more important thing I wanted to say here is that, and why I think guys like him are the future, is that being a GM is a lot bigger than just picking players nowadays. It's not just about being a scout. And I wrote this back when John Dorsey got fired from the Browns, when Dave Gettleman got fired from the Carolina Panthers. And owners are looking at this more as, you're almost like the president of the organization. You're the guy who's a lot more forward-facing. I need you in a suit. I need you doing press conferences. I don't want you just out there looking at film, going to the Senior Bowl, making really aggressive moves like Les Snead has made in the Rams, or Brett Veach has done with the Chiefs to win Super Bowls. I want you to be my guy running this organization. And that when owners take that approach, you start looking at people differently. And so I look a lot at what Howie Roseman was in Philadelphia, and you look at his history there with the coaching staff, when Andy Reid was there. There was a lot of politics involved in that, and he ultimately got a Super Bowl out of it. But that dude has been to hell and back trying to be the GM of that team. And it was a lot of it because he wasn't as accepted as the guys like Kwesi Adofo-Mensah are today.
I think it's because Kwesi speaks the language of owners.
Yeah.
Right. We've talked a lot about, a 62-year-old, white billionaire sitting down and talking to a 41-year-old former football player that's African-American. Well, there's no connection there, except for with Kwesi, there is, because analytics runs everything in the world now. These are successful businessmen that deal with analytics and quantifying things all the time. And when he sits down and prepares and says, we're going this route in our drafting, we're going this route in free agency, because here are the numbers that back it up, that makes them feel safe. Yep. Right? They get that. Okay, you've got the math, right? Now, if they're wrong, because you still have to find good players, right? Like Eric, you'd be the first one to say, you can quantify a lot of things. It's still human beings. And, you know, how human beings act and react and how much heart they have is a difficult thing to quantify, right? So
there's a good question in the chat from Mark Hovey saying, how does an analytics-driven GM measure player leadership skills? He doesn't. Like, that's the point. Like, you hire scouts and evaluators, and I know these players take psychological tests and stuff like that. It's your job to hire. Like, the thing about a general manager, and I think that this is where, and this, I've asked this question of teams all the time, and I don't get a satisfactory answer a lot. But oftentimes I'll ask people within teams, I'm like, how much does your general manager evaluate? And oftentimes it's a lot. And I'm like, that is a very inherently wasteful thing, right? Because you are employing, let's say, on the order of 100 scouts, and then they have 10 bosses, and then those guys have 5 bosses, and then they have 3 bosses, and then there's you. And if you're just going to make a decision you were going to make before, that's not the decision-making process you have as a general manager is how to empower the people beneath you to evaluate. That to me, and again, I think an analytics person is going to be, then an analytics person should be like I think they know that that's the issue, right? And so, I think for the longest time, general manager in a lot of cases was either head cap guy or head scout. And there's I've talked to this person on my podcast. We're friends, and so I'll say his name. Like when Thomas Dimitrov and I talk, that is the biggest thing where like he's saying, I put my own evaluation into this too much, and it's important to know that is a bad thing, right? Because the thing is you want to be process driven, you want to make decisions, and you want to not chase losses. You want to not take things too personally. And the biggest way that you can take things too personally and chase losses is if you are the one who, your ass is on the line with there. If you just trust your evaluators and weigh them properly and come up with the decision on the spot, then you could kind of be divorced from the result a little bit and make better decisions from one decision to the next. And I think an analytics person maybe understands that a little bit better than like a head scout, where there's not their self-worth, but their professional worth is in how they evaluate players. And so they want to keep that because that's how they felt that they got the job in the first place.
Let's talk quarterbacks. Tom Brady, is he going to be back next year, Jeff Chadiha?
No, it doesn't sound like it. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm reading too much into those tea leaves, but I've never heard him talk about his future the way he's talked about it in the last couple of days. He's, talked more about his family being a part of the conversation. Never heard that before. Never heard him talk about just being satisfied with the season. Those are kind of words and those are kind of statements he's never made. And I suspect Tom Brady has gotten everything he's wanted out of the Tampa Bay experience. He's won a championship. It would have been gravy if he'd won 2 in a row, but he's proven that he can win without Bill Belichick. He's proven that he can take another franchise to a championship. He recognizes, to the point about Aaron Rodgers, that maybe he's losing some of the pieces he had that made him successful, that Gronk's talking about not coming back, that Antonio Brown is gone. Chris Godwin is probably going to have a hard time being 100% next season until probably November. And so Tom Brady, his greatest strength as a quarterback in the second half of his career is always recognizing what he needed to be successful. And if he's not having that now, he's not going to have a whole bunch of fun just going out there putting up numbers. Got a lot more records this year. He's put his place in history at such a high perch that any quarterback, whether it's Patrick Mahomes or anybody else who comes along, is going to have a hard time reaching the heights he's reached. And so once you've gotten to that point and you're almost 45 years old, to be 45 on August 3rd, it's time to start thinking about the next chapter of your life. I don't think he's playing football again.
Eric, are you ready for the Blaine Gabbert era of the Tampa
I
Bay?
wasn't ready for the Blaine Gabbert Jacksonville era or the Niners era, so I'm not ready for the Bucs era. I think Jeff makes a great point though, and I also will put this onto the Bills too, because it's if you're not one of those elite accomplished teams in the NFL right now, it's a grind. It's now 18 weeks long. You have to, in most cases, you got to play 3 playoff games every single year now. The Chiefs are the first team in the history of the league to host 3 playoff games in the same playoff year, right? Like that's what we're in now, right? Like that's the world we live in now. And I think about Buffalo the same way I think about Tampa, where it's like you put everything into a season, right? And even Buffalo, you saw them kind of mess around during the season, kind of the same way the Chiefs were doing early. And it's like, do you really want, if you want to guarantee a Super Bowl, do you really want to go through 17 games again, make sure that you get the best record, get the 1 seed, and then still like put everything to chance and all that kind of stuff? And I agree. I don't know. I think Tom's adding it up in his head and he's like, God, this sucks.
I'll also add in, and I think this speaks to what Jeff just said. He was behind Drew Brees on passing yards. He passed him. He was behind Drew Brees on completions. He passed him. He now owns the most completion attempts, touchdowns, yards. All the records are his. And I think that was part of it as well. What is there left to drive him? You know, there's nothing else to prove. He's now done more. He walks away with every record. And I think guys like him are driven by that. They may not say the numbers, but he knows them.
Oh, yeah.
He knows exactly where he was on all those. And now there is one of those numbers that isn't his. And I think that does help drive you into, okay, that's it. I've done all I can do. Right? I think that's.
I mean, the guy went to Tampa. Tampa is the worst record in the history of the NFL. The guy went to Tampa, didn't even win a division. Like, tugged a Super Bowl from the 5 seed against the best quarterback that the league has going. Like,
with no offseason.
Just go away. This is it. You should have retired after last year.
Yeah.
When you add it up, it's absurd that he won that Super Bowl at Tampa. It's absurd.
Yeah, it is absurd, but I think it's also that what he came back for was to check some more boxes record-wise.
Yeah,
he also added, multiple 5,000.
He almost came back and won that game. Now that was wind-aided a ton by the Rams melting down, but like he almost won. They were down 27-3. They had that game tied, and then Todd Bowles just stepped on his own junk at the end of the game, and now they're not even in this. Like the guy is the most absurd. The guys and we cheer for a team where we live in a town with Patrick Mahomes, and Tom Brady is 10 times more absurd than Patrick Mahomes. It's crazy.
For the career. I still haven't seen the wraparound pass from Tom Brady yet, but
yeah, sure. But I mean, if you run Brady's career back, how many Super Bowls does he win? 2, 3?
Oh, he'll get 6.
No, come on.
People forget. And this is not any knock on Brady, but it's a reality check, especially for how we feel about Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City, how many he can win. The first 5 years of Brady's career, outside of him and Kurt Warner, the guys who won and played in Super Bowls were named Trent Dilfer, Brad Johnson, Jake Delhomme,
he was kind of a
Donovan McNabb. It was the worst 5-year stretch of quarterback play in the history of football. Sometimes it's just timing. Sometimes it's just great timing.
But Brady was also like a Brad Johnson-like quarterback at the beginning.
That's what I'm saying.
The clutch Brad Johnson.
Look at the guys that Mahomes has to play against now.
Yeah. But and the other thing is, and I say this again, like this is maybe why Brady is just like forget this. Brady did not play in wild card round from 2010 to 2018, and every one of those regular seasons had 16 games, and every postseason for him had at most 3 games, and now you're adding most likely 2 games to every single one of those schedules now. That's huge, right? That's 10% more play just to get something that like you're just running the score up on everybody. And I can see why he is kind of like, ugh, like this.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. No, I
can see why. From what I've heard on good authority, like the loss Sunday to the Chiefs. As much as we look at the Buffalo Bills and we're like, that's a house, that's a great team. The loss to the Chiefs is going to crush the Bills, I think, mentally, because they're going to lose some coordinators. And it's, again, and it makes me more impressed with what the Bills did in the 90s. But, like, think about the hill that they have to climb just to get right back to where they were this year again.
It's what Jeff said. Every season is its own beast, and now you got to rebuild the whole thing. You don't get I know the Chiefs made it look like you could just pick up where you left off last year by going right back to the Super Bowl and maybe doing it again this year. But it's actually really, really hard.
And the Chiefs have a trophy in the case.
Yes.
Like, that's the difference too.
Well, and the Chiefs don't have the Chiefs standing in front of them, and the Bills do, right? The Bills are a big challenge. The Chiefs are an even bigger challenge. That's there. I do want to say this Jeff made a great point about some things are timing, and that was an ice pocket, at least when you're not going to be the finished product as a quarterback to butt heads with the Brad Johnsons and Trent Dilfers is a better time to do it. I think that's absolutely right. He also, to speak of the timing, he never won a championship, and I think never even went to a Super Bowl that the defense wasn't 8 or better. Yeah. He was never dragging the 26 defense along with him. Yardage one, the way Patrick Mahomes is trying to do right now, the way Peyton Manning did one year with his championship. He won with the Colts. So I think your point's a great one about Tom Brady's definitely the GOAT. There's also some timing that went into some of his successes. Ben Roethlisberger makes it official today, because that's what he does, drag things out forever and ever. It's finally official. Maybe he'll take another lap around Heinz Field. I don't know. Is he a first ballot Hall of Famer? Jeff, you've had this. We started down this road, but he retires today.
No.
I assume you're still where you and I were. He's a first ballot Hall of Famer, correct?
Yeah, but the end of his career always reminded me of something a buddy of mine said. A big Chicago Bulls fan back in the day when Ron Harper was retiring and they'd already lost Rodman and Jordan and Pippen. And I said, man, Ron Harper retired. Now he's like, Jeff, the guys like Ron Harper retire. They just stop playing. I feel like that's kind of what Roethlisberger. He just stopped playing. He retired a long time ago. He just stopped playing football a couple weeks ago.
Yeah,
but no question that he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. I know Eric has a different view of this, but
I've come around a little bit.
Have you come around the last couple weeks after he got his ass kicked by the
him.
Chiefs? You feel better about him now? That was the.
Well, I actually went back and looked, and when you look at wins above replacement since 2006, and that's when we started data. He's 5th or 6th in the league, depending upon. I can't remember if it was 5th or 6th, but he's only behind the Breezes and the Bradys and the Rodgers, and I think Rivers is the one that's interesting. Phillip Rivers actually, statistically, in my opinion, had a better career than Big Ben, but obviously the Super Bowls. And I'm somebody. And I don't know if everybody agrees with me here. I think quarterback wins are a stat that you can use. I think over a couple hundred starts, if you suck, you lose. Or if you play long enough to have as many starts as him and you win as many games as him, that matters. That matters. And I know a lot of people, when they defend kind of crappy quarterbacks, quarterback wins aren't a thing. It's I don't know. I think you're the most important player on the field, and if you win or lose, especially in a conference that has Tom Brady, the aforementioned Phillip Rivers, guys like that, that's a feather in your cap. So and 2 Super Bowls too. It's, as we find out in Kansas City, it's hard to win the Super Bowl, and so for him to have 2 Super Bowls, I think puts him in there. It's also, I've softened my stance on Eli Manning for the same reason. I know Eli. I think both Eli and Big Ben should have retired earlier because I think our view of them is way worse because of how they ended their career. But, both guys stood some of the best in the face and won and won Super Bowls.
And made plays in those games too. Made plays in those games.
Yeah.
Huge plays.
Well, not so much Ben's win against the Seahawks. He was kind of a turd in that game.
No, he was garbage.
The second one was everything you want, right?
Larry Fitzgerald had 1,000 yards receiving in the playoffs of the 2008 season. And Big Ben answered every time. That was a classic Super Bowl.
The question isn't, is he a first ballot Hall of Famer? To me, the question is, where does he rank?
Yeah.
I think that's one for the offseason. But the Hall of Fame, once Troy Aikman goes in,
we're gonna have to have a Troy Aikman episode, friend. I'm sorry. I watch this. You guys, my favorite. He's not
Nobody handed off like Troy Aikman. I mean, Jeff,
Andy Reid is my
Bob
favorite
Greasy
coach.
did, and he's in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Andy Reid is
Tell me
my
what he
favorite
did
coach
in his
of
career.
all time. My second favorite coach of all time is, without a doubt, with a bullet, my second favorite coach of all time is Jimmy Johnson. I study religiously the early 90s Cowboys, and I can tell you right now, Troy Aikman was not just handing the ball off.
No,
ridiculous.
He was putting it, get it right in the
He was throwing 40-yard handoffs to Alvin Harper. Come on.
Wow.
Jay Novacek is as athletic as I am right now, and that dude would make the Pro Bowl every year.
Yeah, he had the best offensive line in football. He had the one of the two best wide receivers. He had the number one defense every single time. Yeah, he was a beast. He was really getting at it.
He won a Super Bowl with Barry Switzer.
Yes, speaking to how strong the team was built. Yeah. You know, that's how good the team was around him. All right, Rams and Niners. What's at stake here for the Rams? Beyond the obvious that they, whatever they're going to lose this year, there's not a lot of firepower to go load it back up. I talked about this with Bob Glauber from the New York News Day today, and I said, hey, the Rams. He said, well, they can draft a guy. I said, with what picks? Right? Like, you need to do it now because, the moment is here. It's now for the Rams, and they better win because they went out and got Matt Stafford to have a better quarterback than the Niners. And if Matt Stafford doesn't beat Jimmy Garoppolo, it is a train wreck with the Los Angeles Rams.
Yeah, in many ways, this should be a Chiefs-Rams Super Bowl because of the two best teams left, but also because no two teams have been more aggressive about trying to win now throughout the last 12 months in these two teams, as far as the moves that they've made. And the Rams, we all know, Stafford move, Von Miller, Odell Beckham Jr., this is what this was all about. And I honestly don't think it's going to be much of a game. I think the Niners offense is on fumes. Garoppolo has, done as much as he can do. Hats off to him. He's been a grinder throughout this postseason. He's played hurt, but I just can't imagine a quarterback not throwing any touchdowns in the postseason to this stage, going off and winning an NFC Championship game. It would blow my mind if I actually had to watch that on Sunday. And so the Rams are interesting to me because they are as up and down as any team that's obviously left, but any team that's a high caliber team in the NFL. And when they're up, they're as good as anybody in the NFL. I mean, they are. When they played Arizona a couple weeks ago, it was stunning to see how easily they demolished a decent team. But then when they're down, it's a whole different story. And last week we saw them be up and down in the same game. And so that's really always going to be the question about them is, can they put together that kind of performance over the course of the next 8 quarters potentially and finish off what Les Snead started when he made all these moves? They are in 100%. There is no tomorrow with them. I'll use every cliche I could possibly can. If they lose this game on Sunday, they should burn the building down because they've done everything they can to win a championship this year.
Yeah.
I think they lose Sunday, Jeff.
How?
Football. This is what I love about football because, for one, and this is interesting. This is like everybody. We've tried to throw the betting market angle at everybody this year, and this is one where we were very high on the Bengals going into the year, but not high at all the Niners. Pinnacle Sports, which is the sharpest sports book in Europe, had the 49ers with the 3rd highest odds to win the Super Bowl going into the season. People bet at Pinnacle, and of course, when they're 3-4, 2-5, whatever the hell they were, they look like idiots. Now they're coming back.
Yeah, but did they get any action on that? Like, if you put it up,
they have to.
So you're
saying markets on that.
You're saying that's where sharp bettors were going, and they were betting the Niners and bet them all the way up to the 3rd favorite.
And I think this is why. So, and I said this on Petro's show Tuesday when I was on. The Niners, it is a styles make fight situation when they play the Rams. The Rams defense is engineered. Like, I think the Rams, if they get to the Super Bowl against the Chiefs or the Bengals, will have a better day defensively than most teams will. Because they have Aaron Donald, they have Von Miller, they have this Gaines fellow that plays nose for them who's really good, and they have Leonard Floyd who's had another good season after coming over from Chicago. They have a great front four. Their linebackers aren't very good, but they mostly play defensive backs. They play deep, and they kind of do what the Chargers do. Like they invite you to run, and then they make you be patient going up and down the field. And we know that Pat has sort of evolved to that, but most of the league hasn't. And that's why the Rams have had great defense over the past years. The Rams disguise their coverages, so they run the coverage that they show. So too high, to too high, or single high to single high, just 54% of the time, meaning 46% of the time, they basically disguise their coverage. However, that number gets cut in half when they play the 49ers. And that is because the 49ers, they are the ones that motion you around. They're the ones that get you out of position. And the Niners this year led the league. I believe it was either them or Kansas City that led the league in motions this season. And again, this is the craziest thing. When teams in general this year disguise coverage 21% on early downs, they only do it 14% against the 49ers. That offense takes you out of some of the edges that you get on defense by being super like the Rams are. And then you factor in the fact that Jordan Fuller, who's their free safety, who green dot calls the plays, he's out, right? So he's out. Eric Weddle's in. They have some younger guys playing safety. I just think this is why the Niners have won 6 consecutive games against the Rams. It's because it's just a different, the 49ers are not a team that anybody builds a defense against.
Okay, Eric, all that math you just gave me, I'm going to say what I said before. 0 touchdown passes by the quarterback in the postseason. But 23 points in the postseason. All that motion doesn't matter if you're not scoring points.
Let me I know that Jimmy Garoppolo is hurt relative, but Jimmy Garoppolo had that thumb injury in Week 18 against, and that dude went 90 yards with no timeouts against this Rams defense to win the game.
Who the hell am I listening to? Wasn't it just like 8-9 weeks ago we were talking about the value of the quarterback versus a defense, and now you're like, who are you right now?
Jimmy G's okay. Here's the thing, and this is where everybody. Jeff Garcia got in trouble today for talking shit to Mina Kimes and all this stuff. Here's the thing: Garoppolo is not a great quarterback, but the Niners have a great passing game. And again, that is and you can't do it all the time. But right now, we are in the here and now. And Jimmy Garoppolo this year led the league in yards per completion. He led the league in adjusted yards per attempt. He was second in the NFL in yards per pass. And again, I'm not saying that he's the only guy that could drive this car the same way that Pat is with the Chiefs. But right now, that is a successful passing game. And he would – and look – I'm not going to project what he did outside the snowstorm in Lambeau to what he's going to do indoors against the Rams when 70% of those fans are going to be Niners fans.
Listen, I'm fine. I may come back and say, hey, you were right? Like, wow. But, I mean, I'm looking here because I thought this adjusted net yards per pass attempt. You know who led the league in 1990?
Joe Montana.
Not bad. Go older and down on ability.
Well, so Steve DeBerg for the Chiefs.
Steve DeBerg. Listen, but and they did. Wait a minute, Steve DeBerg, and Steve DeBerg was taking no one to the Super Bowl. Line quarterback.
If Nick Lowry doesn't come up short on that field goal, they go in round 2, baby.
Yeah,
and that's.
I know, but like you can quote the black ink and who leads in this and who leads in that, and I'm so proud of myself that I actually remember that I saw that he did that. He was 6th in the NBA that year.
He was benched the next year for Mark Classic. It was great.
Steve DeBerg was not taking anybody to the Super Bowl. He was not.
But Jimmy G has already taken this team to the Super Bowl.
That's it. The sun has shone on the dog's ass, and it's not doing it again.
They're
the
here.
sun shines on a dog's ass every once in a while, and it did in 2019. And I'm going to tell you, I don't know how you can look at 36 points they've scored in 2 games, Eric. I get it was brutally cold and crappy environment in Green Bay and everything. 36 points. He hasn't thrown a touchdown. Like
Matthew Stafford led the league in interceptions this year.
If he busts out and spins 4 touchdowns, I'll be like, hey, it's there when they need it.
It's not even that, though, Petro. It's can the Niners control the game? And I think they can control the game.
I think you want the Niners to win.
I do want the Niners to win because my model likes the Niners. But it's also, but again, I'm not just trying to spin narratives because here's the thing. Brass tacks, they've won the last 6 games. including both this year. And it's
I like this. He hasn't had to throw a touchdown.
Yeah.
No, he has. He has.
And he had to. He had to in week 18. That team was down 17-0 at the end of the second quarter. They were going to not make the playoffs, and they came back and won on the road in LA against this exact team.
All the more reason why.
Yeah.
And Sean McVay's just going to roll out the same game plan and everything's going to be the same. Listen, no. My point too, he hasn't had to throw a touchdown pass. No, you do. You do. When you have to kick a field goal to win in overtime, or when you're having to sweat out Dak Prescott and his painful ass 2-minute execution down the field,
you have not done enough. Quarterback is again.
You have not done enough as a quarterback,
okay.
Right?
Petro, here's what we need to do. Because we need to cut out the middleman. Because I was going to go to my book and bet -110 on San Francisco plus 3.5. I'll bet you right now, just even -100 both sides.
Just to win or with the spread.
So we're like, I'm coming to your house this weekend. I'm going to the Chiefs game. We're hanging out. Monday, lunch is on whoever is on the other side of this game.
Okay.
You and me.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. You know what I love about this whole thing is that Soren hates Kyle Shanahan and you hate Matthew Stafford. So someone's going to be sitting here next week.
I don't hate Matthew Stafford. Because honestly, like
no one's going to be unhappy.
Trying to figure out why these things have happened, and like I think I put together a pretty compelling case as to why. Like everybody's like, oh, Shanahan's in McVay's head. I don't think it's that. I think it's just different. Like it's a matchup issue.
Right. All right. Real quick, who's going to be playing in the Super Bowl? Because I have another round of fantasy playoff fantasy draft to do. Right. So this week we got to get to it. Yeah. So you're picking the Niners, right, Eric? And I know you're picking the Chiefs, right?
Niners Chiefs. Yep.
Niners Chiefs. Jeff, I'm going Rams Chiefs. Where are you?
Chiefs Rams. At this point in the season, I always root for the best matchup because I can't imagine spending 2 weeks talking about Bengals 49ers or Chiefs 49ers. So Chiefs Rams would be a great game.
My boss Chris does not want to see Niners Bengals because he doesn't want to have to relive his 2 Super Bowl losses. So I honestly almost got fired the other day because I'm like, Chris, you might get to call Bengals Niners. He goes, fuck you. Like he was like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to like relive my losses again. So, you know,
is the game in Kansas City? Do you see a boat race? Do you see the Chiefs pounding the Bengals? Do you see a tight game? How do you see the game played, Jeff?
I think it's going to be high scoring. I don't trust the Chiefs defense right now. And so, and for maybe it's recency bias because outside of playing Pittsburgh, they've struggled against every other team they played over the last 6 weeks. So I think the Bengals are going to score points, but Mahomes at this stage, it's hard to bet against him. So I'll take Chiefs 31-27.
All right, 31-27.
I don't disagree with Jeff that the Bengals probably will cover. But if you are a betting person, wait. A lot of money is coming in on the Chiefs. And so you could probably get that number at a pretty cheap 7.5 pretty soon. I actually think it goes under. Here's the thing with the Chiefs. Until the Buffalo game, they had not allowed a score in the last 6 minutes or since week 6 in the final 2 minutes of the half. And they allowed 3 against the Bills. So there was a little bit of randomness that I think was inherent in that Bills game. I agree that they're not a great defense, but I do think you see better outcomes on Sunday. I think it's a little bit more lower scoring. I think it's like 27-20. Chiefs go to the 3rd straight Super Bowl.
37-20 Chiefs. I think the Chiefs win. I think the Chiefs cover. I think there were a lot of 50-50 balls that went the Bengals' way. They've been living on those. I think it's midnight and Cinderella, here's your pumpkin. I think the Bengals are doing a lot of things right as an organization, but Joe Burrow is a sitting duck. He's not moving that well. They're going to get to him. I think they will create some turnovers. It's time. He's due to turn the football over. He wasn't exactly turnover free, and I don't think he just suddenly unlocked, the magic secret of how not to ever turn the football over. I think the Bengals turn it over at least twice, and I think Patrick Mahomes is what Eric Eager said he needed to be when they were at 3-4. He is white hot, and I don't think anything's cooling him down. I think the Chiefs 37-20. All right, that's going to do it for us here on the 2 Deep Podcast. Remember, if you're catching us via the podcast, we stream live every Thursday at 9 o'clock on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook. Of course, we have our Red, Gold, and Bold Kansas City podcast we do on Tuesday nights, streaming that one live, 9 p.m. Central again on that one. So for Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network and NFL.com, Eric Eager from Pro Football Focus, who is coming to my town, Kansas City, Jeff's town, Kansas City. Looking forward to that for the AFC Championship game. My name is Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB. Thanks for joining us here on 2 Deep.